we on? Good. Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not. Hi there, and welcome to Better Than Not, the podcast that aims to capture shifting perspectives and thought-provoking ideas in conversation while asking the question, is anything what it seems? Based on my series, A Changing Frame of Reference, which you can read on the Substack app, and I hope you will, as it might give you some insight into what the podcast is all about. I also hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel so I can continue to bring you great guests like we have today. I'm your host, Doug Gardam, and today it's a real privilege for me to welcome music composer Jeffrey Ryan to Better Than Not. Jeff, how are you?
I am very well, Doug. Pleasure to be here.
I am very excited for the conversation today. Jeffrey is the recent recipient of the Classical Composer of the Year by the 2025 Western Canadian Music Awards, which is kind of a cool thing that you're actually on the podcast after having received that award. Very cool. He also just premiered a work with the Vancouver, I believe it's the Vancouver Orchestra in January, called Miss Carr in 7 Scenes. We'll talk about this a little bit, but it was a premiere, pretty exciting time. He works in the areas of, I'll say, art, music. I think it's called art music, but also choral, chamber, orchestra, as well as opera. But it was through chamber music that I actually was introduced to his work. I recently saw the Griffin Trio perform here in Abbotsford. Actually, Roman Boris, the cellist from Griffin Trio, was on the podcast, and he actually introduced me to Jeffrey. But during the performance, they played this piece called Chimera, and Jeffrey is the composer of that. Well, that piece of music took both my wife and away from the auditorium, like our present place, and took us to another place. I call it hallucinatory, but I've never really done a hallucinogen, so that's not necessarily something that I can actually act. But we went to a different world, both of us, not the same one, but we were amazed that music could do that. And so I was kind of excited to hear that I could actually meet Jeffrey online here and have a chat about it. So again, welcome. But before we get into all kind of the details of some of these work, because I'd love to do that, do you remember when you first realized you could compose, Jeff?
Compose versus want to compose?
Well, it's a good question. I found that in this area of music, you're either a performer or a composer. It's not often that you're composing and performing. Like it's a separation, so to speak. And what I'm always intrigued by is the creative world that allows someone like yourself to compose pieces like you do. And in this particular one, we'll get onto some of the other pieces, but Chimera, like, do you remember like what like were you very, very young? Like how did it account? Do you remember like what kind of took place?
Well, I was always very, very musical.
Oh, okay.
So the first musical memory is, and you may remember this, Doug. Petula Clark sang a song called Downtown.
Oh, yes.
And it was a huge hit. In Canada, it was a huge hit in 1965, and I had just turned 3.
Oh, wow.
And I learned it off the radio, and I sang it everywhere. I sang it all the time, just singing Downtown.
At 3 years old.
At 3 years old. And I remember very clearly that my dad wanted to buy me the 45. For your younger viewers and listeners, they might not know what 45 is.
Yes.
I still have it. Boy, I can run over to my shelf and show it to you. But
wow.
I do remember going to various department stores, like Zellers and Kresge's and Woolco. and going to the record department and asking for the 45, and it would be sold out because it was such a huge hit.
Oh my
And
goodness.
then one day we were living in some townhouses at Brimley and Ellesmere in
Okay.
Scarborough, Ontario. And one day I saw my dad through the balcony window. I saw him come home from work, and he had a bag in his hand, and he handed me this bag, and it was the 45.
Oh
And I
man.
still remember that. I still remember seeing him walking across the parking lot with this bag in his hand. So my ear was always tuned to music, and it was always kind of through singing. So,
Interesting.
I listened to, the Monkees and
Yep.
things like that. And then the big thing was the Partridge Family.
Oh my goodness.
Very, very big.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
I had all the albums, and I watched the show, and I wanted Shirley Jones to be my mom.
Uh-huh.
And
I think we
I
all did.
I sang all those songs. I used to walk to school. So I grew up in a small town called Fergus,
Yep.
Ontario. So I walked to school, and I used to sing the
Oh man.
song of the week. There was always a song in each episode, and I would be singing the song of the week to myself as I walked to school. But I didn't sing the melody because I was more interested in the background vocals.
Oh
So
wow.
I would be singing all the oohs and ahs and all back up. But you know what it was doing? It was training my ear to listen to all the layers
Yes.
that are in a piece of music. So that was kind of the start. And then I went through Captain and Tennille, which was
Oh.
another very formative,
Yep.
and incredible kind of musical arrangements. Like Tony Tennille had an incredible voice, but also Daryl Dragon did these incredible musical arrangements
Yes.
that, again, training my ear. I took guitar lessons when I was, I think, about 8, and
Really?
I
Okay.
hated practicing.
Yeah.
And I would forget to go to my lessons, which my parents had paid for. So
Yep.
that didn't go over very well. Um, so that stopped, but I really wanted to play the piano, and
Okay.
in high school I convinced my parents to buy a piano, but
Uh,
but they'd had a bad experience with the guitar. So they didn't want to spend a lot of money on a piano, understandably. They got an old piano for $100 that was so rusted inside it had to be tuned a whole tone flat. But I
that's
totally
good.
took to it. And when I got into high school, um, I started, when I joined the band, I started taking music because they were going to go on an exchange to England, and I wanted to go
Right.
to England.
Yep. Yep.
So I very smartly decided to play the alto saxophone because the teacher was an alto saxophone player. So
Ah.
I got kind of in special
Yeah.
that way.
Really.
We had a fantastic music program, and we had a fantastic brand new vocal program. So I played in
Oh.
the concert band. I played in the junior band by the time we got to grade 13. I sang in the choir, and I sang in the little pop choir. There was an 8-voice pop choir that was called Surge. It's called Surge, which is the letters of Fergus minus the F
All right.
mixed up. Turned out it was also a dairy trucking company, and Fergus, it was in a very dairy area. Um, but so I was
Interesting.
out like 3 nights a week for rehearsals. Um, and so again, like sitting in a band
Oh yeah.
and hearing all of the other instruments around me and hearing how music was put together and just being able to listen in those layers, it was all very, very informative. And then we did in grade 13 have a composition component.
Oh.
Um,
Okay.
we had to compose a duet, and I wrote a duet for 2 alto saxophones in kind of a Baroque kind of style, which again was kind of calculated
Wow.
because I played alto sax and the teacher played alto sax. So he said, let's do this at music night. So it was actually
That's pretty cool.
at the annual music night. That was grade 13. And we did concert band arranging and conducting. And it was just fantastic
Wow.
in a way that I think a lot of music programs are not anymore. Like there's just so many cuts to music programs in schools.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I was so blessed to have been there. But you know,
Interesting.
a lot of orchestras have what they call school programs. It's like an hour-long concert that's during a school day, and they will bus people in to attend the concerts.
Okay.
And the nearest orchestra for us that was doing that was the Hamilton Philharmonic. So Fergus was maybe an hour from Hamilton.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And another thing you need to know about me is that I absolutely love astronomy. I was very much a junior astronomer. If I went to bed one night and I knew that it was a clear sky, I would get up in the middle of the night and I'd look through all the windows in the house to see all the constellations.
Interesting.
And
Oh,
I
my
learned all
goodness.
the mythology and all of that. So I was a junior astronomer, and that is germane to what I'm about to tell you. We went to the Hamilton Philharmonic for a school show, and they played excerpts from Holst's The Planets.
Oh my goodness.
Now,
did you know this?
I didn't come from a classical background. I listened to the Partridge Family. I listened
Right.
to Captain and Sneal. My parents were not, I mean, they were musical people, but they didn't study music. My dad really liked opera. My mom had taken some singing lessons when she was young in Scotland.
Interesting.
But it was not a part of their lives. They listened to Shirley Bassey.
Yes.
That was their thing. So this was all a revelation to me. So to go and if you know the planets, it's a huge orchestra. And they didn't play the whole piece because it's a major multi-movement work. But they played excerpts, and I'm sure they played Mars, which is the da 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 dum dum da da dum da 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 dum dum, like it, and it's big brass and so many colors, so many instruments, and it was about astronomy.
Oh my goodness.
So I was like, I've never heard this before. This is amazing.
Could music be made this way?
It was that moment that, even though I had written my own pop songs for my solos in voice class and things like that, writing my own lyrics, which is generally not advised. But it was at that concert that I thought, I want to do this.
Really?
This is amazing.
So you're like 19 at this time? 18?
This was probably grade 11.
Oh,
so,
okay. I'm thinking 13. Okay. So yeah.
Grade 13 was like, but that came later, just the actually being able to compose something and doing band arrangements. I did a band arrangement of Big Spender.
Yes.
And
cool.
that was fun, and we had to conduct the rehearsals and do all the parts. And back then, you wrote everything out by hand, right?
Yeah.
So it was huge. It was a fantastic experience. And then when I started at Wilfrid Laurier, I was going to be an accountant.
Oh my. Okay, so this is the time of the story. Okay, this is what I love, because I'm so far you've kind of gone like, I'm thinking, because we're in the same era, so we're going through different musical influences, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and you play, like, I had a band actually in high school.
Okay.
So there's that part of things that's going on. So when you say the different influences, I can, because it just changes your world when you hear certain things. Now you go to Wilfrid Laurier, you've got all this, you're arranging already, you've already seen and been participating in the music world, and you're going to be an accountant at Laurier. What happened? Because mine didn't turn out that way. So I'm so interested.
The thing was that my dad was the sheet metal and welding teacher in my high school.
Oh, really?
So I was never in the tech wing. That's why we moved to Fergus. He they opened a tech wing, and he
Oh, okay.
became the sheet metal and welding teacher. He had been a tool and die worker when he emigrated from Ireland,
Okay, cool.
but he got into teaching. So he knew all of my teachers, right?
All right.
And I was a really good student. So there'd be
Yep.
these staff meetings, and they'd be telling him, oh, Jeff did this and Jeff did that, whatever achievement they were thinking of. And the accounting teacher, I also love math.
There
And
you
I
go.
love numbers, and I actually love accounting because the numbers have to balance.
Yep, yep,
Like
yep.
there's an elegance in that.
And there's a huge connection between music and math too. So like
There absolutely can be.
Yeah.
So the accounting teacher said to my dad, the accounting teacher's name was Paul Cook. Who just passed away, actually. So Mr. Cook said to my dad, Jeff's really good at accounting, and that's a really good, solid career.
Absolutely.
And I think my parents had visions of like a condo in Hawaii to retire to or something like that. So even though absolutely everyone else assumed I was going to go into music, my parents somehow convinced me to go into accounting. So I applied to the business school at Wilfrid Laurier, which was in Kitchener-Waterloo, which is in Waterloo, not far from Fergus. But they had a really great business school, and I got in there, and I asked for special permission to take music theory and first year composition as my arts electives.
Oh, that's very cool. Composition too.
Well, yes. And I took, and my first teacher was Owen Underhill. It was his last year at Laurier, and then he left to teach at Simon Fraser. So he's been in here in the Vancouver area ever since then. And I had a meeting with Owen, and I took my band arrangement of Big Spender, and I had a cassette of it.
Yep.
And I had my saxophone duet and some of the songs that I'd written, and I showed him what I had done, and he let me take
that's cool
first year composition. And by October I was sitting in business 111 lab class where you get these business cases and how would you handle this situation and that situation. And I would always have something completely different from what they thought you should handle. And I'd be sitting at the back in microeconomics class, just kind of going,
oh my goodness.
I thought, what am I doing? And I was doing really well in theory, and my theory instructor was the assistant dean of music.
Oh my goodness.
Dr. Ann Hall, loved her. And I went to her and I said, please, can I audition and transfer? I just ran screaming from the School of Business because it was just not for me.
So audacious.
So I was loving, I was doing really well in sight singing and all these things. And so because they'd known me for a couple of months, they kind of went, yeah, okay, you have to audition, and you have to audition on an instrument. And you'll remember, the piano didn't come till I was in high school.
Right.
I didn't have years of piano training behind me. So it was either do I audition on piano or do I audition in voice? And I thought, if I get in voice, then by third year, I'll be in the opera, and I won't have time to compose. So I thought I should work up a piano audition. So I worked up a piano audition.
Oh, man.
And when it was over, that was December of that first year. And when it was over, I went into the dean's office, and he said to me, well, that wasn't great. But because you want to be a composer and not a pianist, we're going to let you in.
Oh, how cool is that?
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean, in the end, 4 years later, I won the gold medal in music there for the top student. So, it was a good thing.
Oh my goodness. I love this story.
But you know what? The thing is, and this has been true in a lot of areas of my life, um, if I had auditioned in music from the get-go,
Yes.
I would not have gotten in because you had to have grade 8 piano and I had
Yep.
grade 6. I
Yep.
didn't
Yep.
play to the level of anybody else that was getting into music. So I would not have gotten in. I
Oh my
kind of came
goodness.
in through the side door. And the
Look
fact
at
that
this.
they said yes to me
That's
just
crazy.
opened everything up. And yeah,
Jeff, that is it's such a crazy story, but yet so like your path was open for you. Like it's like, and it's not conventional, right? Like it's just you hear these
not at
stories
all.
over and over again and they never go like the way they were. I was gonna say when you say that, and I don't know him, but in Me, the Elton John story, he talks about getting he auditions for an orchestra for a dinner theater and he doesn't get the audition. Like this is a crazy thing. You're going, Elton John didn't get an audition. Are you out of your mind? But that was the day he was given a manila envelope with Bernie Taupin's lyrics in it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So like it's how like you say, and you recognize if I had actually applied for music, I wouldn't have got in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's almost destiny in a way that's just so in your face.
And you know what? The music school at Laurier only started in 1975, and this was 1980. So
Oh, so
the
it's new.
school was only 5 years old.
Oh wow.
The school is now this year 50 years old, and they've commissioned a big piece for soprano and string quartet from me as part of
Oh,
the
what a
celebration for that, which is
what an honor.
so wonderful.
Well,
Yeah.
what did you do to get the gold in that
You just
in
had
your
to
foot?
have really good, you had to have the highest marks. That was all.
Oh, okay, but you were already composing pieces at this point.
Well, you know what? I had composed songs. I had done band arrangements of pop music, that kind of thing. I
Hmm.
hadn't written what one might call classical music,
Oh, really?
or contemporary music or things like that. And I really credit Owen Underhill
Oh,
for
okay.
kind of challenging me to think outside the box that I had been in.
Oh,
You know, I could do good vocal arrangements, I could do good band arrangements, I could do all of those kinds of things. But for our first kind of piece that we wrote, um, I brought in something that was kind of triadic. It was tonal. It, it was not really outside the box so much of what I was used to. And
okay.
he said to me, I want you to think about a sound that you've never heard before
Ah,
and figure out how to make that sound. And so I ended up taking this piece that started out as, I think, like a little choir with, I can't even remember much about it, and it became a piece for 3 clarinets, alto saxophone, and a vibraphone, where the 3 saxophones all play the same note, but they do this to bend the pitch. So they come in and out of being in tune, and it
oh,
creates
wow.
this sound that's got this kind of increasing and decreasing vibration inside it.
Oh,
Um,
that's
with
cool.
with this obligato saxophone part, and then a vibraphone that was playing different kinds of chords and different effects. And it was something that, that I had never heard before, that I had never imagined before. But Owen really pushed me to try to engage my imagination beyond any sounds that I had already heard.
Wow, that's special having like a mentor like that in your life, boy. Oh, that's kind of. It reminds me of the movie Whiplash, actually, a little bit.
Which I have not seen,
Oh, you
because
haven't?
no, I have not seen, because I've heard, and maybe you can tell me, because what I heard about it was that it was very much about an abusive teacher, And I thought, no, there's too much of that in the world already. So
Yes.
I'm not that I experienced that in any way, but I've had fantastic teachers, fantastic mentors. But just kind of in the music world, there's so much kind of bullying, and you hear about people that have bad experiences in
Yep.
their lessons, and I think I don't know that anyone still wraps fingers with a ruler, but
Yes, I hear that.
it's
It
I
it's
thought I don't
it's
need.
it's interesting that you bring that up because it is very much about that. That's what makes the for me what made the film so interesting
Yeah,
is where is this break level because he's pushing. So Simmons, who I really like, J.K.
yeah,
Simmons,
J.K. Yeah.
S.K. I think it is. Um, he is insane almost as far as how hard he pushes the drummer prodigy, so to speak,
Hmm.
right? But it asks you the question, like, where is it too much? Like how far? And in clearly in the film, you're going, oh, that's too much. But what comes out of it is brilliance. And that's what they're
Yeah.
kind of demonstrating. So I found it a fascinating show, but quite bothered by,
Hmm.
to your point, the level of, and you can't really call it anything but abuse. But it's that like how hard does a teacher push a student who he knows has the, and in a way, I've always thought it sounds like Owen was like that for you. There's a gentle way to do that that still can push at that same level.
Yes.
And you probably kind of like no one can be as hard on Jeff as Jeff.
Well, that's true enough. The way you agonize over every note choice.
It's
But your point is absolutely true, and I do a tiny bit of teaching now at Capilano University. I've got
oh, okay.
three students. They're all lovely, and they're so interesting, and they're really, each of them is a star in their own way.
Well, that's cool.
Um, but it really is about, like, to me, teaching is about seeing where that young composer is right now, and what's the next step for them, and how can I help them to move to that next step. So
Mm.
you're not like trying to get them from here to here. You're trying to get them from here to here, and to just build and build on that. And that is, I think, the gentle way. It's supportive, but also getting them in whatever piece that they're writing to fine tune their thinking, their thought
Hmm.
process as a composer,
Well,
and building on that. So every piece becomes a teaching moment. So I don't like to say, now I would like you to write a string quartet.
right.
um, it's like, what interests you, and what performance possibilities are available to you. Who are your colleagues in the school that you might write for? Because they'll play your music and you'll get feedback, and that's part of the process. So if what a student wants to do is write a solo piano piece, like, great, what's your idea? Let's talk about it. And every piece becomes a path to a teachable moment in terms of
Mm.
how to craft music in whatever way you're doing that.
Well, that's to me what I love about that creative part and that about composing, whether it be in writing, it's in art, or the craft is at that level that you can direct where the so-called talent or skill is kind of going and what you're trying to accomplish. And you're describing that, I think, in composing. What I'm really interested in now is that you were very interested in pop music and the switch to the classical, like when I kind of opened with talking about art song
Mm-hmm.
or opera or chamber music or like the classical part. How did that shift going from there versus the popular pop music, so to speak?
Well, to a great extent, music is music. There's many different ways
The
of
category, yes.
putting sounds together, and I would say that there are a couple of things that are primary features of pop music, and certainly the pop music that I grew up with, which was more melody based, that was more often keyboard based,
Right.
that kind of thing. Now it's a lot about percussion and production and things like that. So it was kind of a different time. But I think generally speaking, with pop music, the two big takeaways for me are, what makes pop music popular.
Mm.
One is clarity of intent, and another is directness of emotional expression. And those are things that can apply to all kinds of music. And those are things that inform the kind of music that I write.
Mm.
So
And
that's perhaps, kind of the link for me.
yes, yes. Well, when you mention like the background, like I'm now starting to really why Chimera made such an impact on us, because there's so many influences along with the story of how the music tells the story. There's not much wonder it took us away, because there's a lot behind that. So
Well,
when
thank you.
I well when I find a piece that impacts me like in that way, um, there's something more there than just I wrote this in 15 minutes.
Oh no, it took 15 minutes. But
No,
the
but
but
you know
the
what I mean? It wasn't
Yeah.
just all inspiration. There's something that's been put together and formed and crafted like a fine statue or a painting, and even.
Oh, I should have pulled out the file of all of the preparation work that went into
Oh,
Chimera.
oh my
Um,
goodness, man.
it was a slightly different approach than I would normally take with a piece. And there's a bunch of things that I want to respond to what you said. And before I forget, I want to thank you for expressing your experience of the piece,
Mm,
because to me, there are three kinds of listeners. There are the people who listen with their heads, who are
mm,
listening in oh, that was so interesting what happened with that idea and how that connected and so on. There are people who listen with their hearts,
mm,
where they are really they enter the world and feel the emotional sweep, the dramatic sweep, the trajectory in that sense, on that level of a piece of music. And there are the people who listen with their bodies, the
mm-hmm.
people who experience music through the way that they feel inside. That um, if it's fast music and there's a strong pulse, that they want to tap their foot, or they feel like moving in some way. And I try to make sure that there is something in every piece for all three of those kinds of
Oh,
listeners.
that's like almost like mind, body, soul kind of thing. Like it's
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And
it
I'll
and
tell you, no, I was going to say, there was I had a piece called "The Linearity of Light," which is an
oh,
orchestra piece. It's the first piece that I wrote for
I
the
love the
Vancouver
title.
Symphony when I was in residence with the symphony. That was the first thing that they did, and it subsequently got played by the Okanagan Symphony in Kelowna.
Oh, okay.
And it was before intermission, and at intermission, a couple of older ladies came up to me. They were sisters, and
Okay.
they were actually sitting near me. I had noticed them, and they said, "We used to be dancers, and when
Ah,
we heard your music,
okay.
we wanted to dance. We wanted to get up and dance." And that was like, that is such a gift for them
Oh
to tell
yeah.
me that,
Compliment. Oh
because
my
that's the kind
goodness.
of experience I want people to have, that kind of engaged experience
Oh,
with
that's
my
very cool.
music, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
sure.
but in terms of Chimera specifically, there was a lot of pre-planning, more than usual. Um, because I was toying with two different titles for that piece.
Oh, okay.
One was Chimera, and a chimera is a mythological creature that's made up of three different animals. There's a goat, there's a lion, there's a snake. So it's a creature that's made up of three different DNAs. And I was writing for the Griffin Trio, right?
Yes,
It was
absolutely.
an anniversary piece for Music Toronto. Um, and I've known the Griffin Trio for years and years and years, and
Oh,
I
that's
wrote my triple concerto for them, and we've done a lot of different things together. But I'd never written just a proper trio for them. And amazingly, even though a griffin is a kind of chimera,
yes.
it's
Yep.
three parts and it's a trio, no one had written a piece for them called Chimera. So
Interesting.
that was one option. And the other option was I was going to call it proportional representation.
Oh,
And that has to do with the structure of the piece. Because
okay.
I'm one of the things that I try to stress with composers is something that we don't get taught a lot. And I think of it as temporal balance. We think about balancing a chord, we think about balancing different instruments. In terms of constructing the trajectory of a piece, I think of temporal balance. I think of really listening in my head in real time with what I've already written and experiencing it with the intention of when is it time for a change?
Ah,
When is this idea played out and I need something new? When I was starting out, I used to feel really panicked that I'm going to lose the audience.
right, right.
So you have an idea, and then you have another idea, and then you have another idea, and if you look at my really, really, really early works, um, which you won't ever look at because they're not in my catalog.
Oh,
It's everything, like everything is thrown at them, right? It's like there's been no editing. There's been no editing at all. It's ideas, ideas, ideas. And what I've learned about composing over the years is that composing is not about what you put into a piece. It's about what you take out. It's
oh,
about, it's about
Jeff.
leaving, it's about leaving only what needs to be there to create the effect or the
Oh
emotion
my.
or whatever it is that you're wanting to create. Um,
Oh,
so a lot of I'm very, very, very careful about pacing and about where the energy levels shift and sometimes, like for example, I'm sitting at my drafting board writing because I write with a pencil and paper.
oh,
Um,
yes.
when I come to something the next day, the first thing I do is read through in real time what I've already done, because it gets me back into the space of the piece. But also, I will do these tiny little tweaks, like that bar needs to be one beat longer. That bar needs to be one beat shorter. That section needs to be a little longer. Um,
Wow.
I'm really paying attention to that. And then it changes as you write more of the piece. You go back and you adjust things. And I do a lot of calculation in terms of time, of where golden means are and that kind of thing. Because for me, if you get that right,
Mm,
then a
mhm.
listener can hopefully be so in the moment that they aren't aware of how much time has passed.
Yes.
I remember when I was doing my doctorate in Cleveland, and we had group lessons. One of my doctoral colleagues, we were listening to a recording. I had had a song cycle that had been premiered, and we were listening to the recording in my lesson. And one of my colleagues said, "And you know what? The thing is, it just feels like it's exactly the right length. What is it, like 10 minutes?" And I said, "It's 17 minutes."
Oh my.
but to you it felt like 10, and that is a good thing.
Oh, you know, when you
Because
hit
it,
it,
you
then
know, yeah,
absolutely.
exactly. And that happened with Chimera when the Griffin Trio did it in at K Meek Center. Someone came up. It's a 12-minute piece, and someone came up after at intermission and said to me, "You know what? It was finished." And I turned to my friend next to me and I said, "It's been 10. It's been 12 minutes. That was 12 minutes."
That's what it
Because
felt like,
that
Jeffrey.
sounds like long. That sounds like a long time, but it goes like that if you're in the moment. And again, like to hear an audience member have that experience of a piece of mine that I crafted,
Oh,
that they could be so in the moment. That's such a wonderful thing to hear. But the whole proportional representation here, because I think I would rather have a proportional representation system, voting system.
yeah.
And I know that Jamie Parker is also like really pays attention to these what's going on
Yes.
in the world of politics, um, and you know when you're thinking of ideas for a commission, you're thinking about the performers that you're writing for, and you want something that can go out into the world, but you really want to show off and really tailor it
Yeah.
to the people you're writing for, right? So the idea of proportional representation, and this is still in the piece, but so the entire 12 minutes continuous is structured that
Oh,
it starts really, really slow at, I think, 36
mm,
beats to the minute. And there's a long section. And then there's these kind of, we call it metric modulation, where a particular note value at one tempo becomes a different note value at a new tempo. And so the pulse changes, but you don't really notice it. So it
that's
just kind of evolves. So the first section is really slow and it's the longest section. And then it transforms. I love transforming where you don't
yeah.
notice that it's happening. It
Yes.
transforms into a bit faster tempo and a bit slower section, or a bit shorter section. And then it's a little faster and a little shorter. And then it's a little faster and a little shorter. And then the final, I think it's 190 something beats a minute. It's just bum,
Oh,
bum, 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 like this. And it's just evolved in that way. But every tempo is a proportion of the tempo before. And if you want to think of
uh,
it as what
that's
a
very
House of
cool.
Commons might look like under proportional representation, there's there's going to be one party that has the most, and there'll be another
Yes.
party that has a bit fewer seats, and then fewer, and then fewer, and then the Greens at the end with their two seats or one seat, and so it's a really short, really fast section, and so it ends really big. Roman likes pieces that end big,
It does.
so
It
I
does.
wanted to make sure that I gave a big ending, and Chimera has that. But you know what? That totally informed the structure of the piece. But I decided to go with Chimera for a title because the three different DNAs are three different musical ideas, and
Yes.
they get explored and recombined in the course of the piece. So it works on both of those levels. Um, but I also, to a certain extent, you have to think practically. A piece called Chimera can be programmed in a lot of different contexts,
Mm,
whereas
true
a
enough.
piece
True.
called proportional representation, people are going to look at that and go, oh, well, what's that mean? What's that doing on this program? How does that relate to these other pieces? So I decided to go with that. But the whole idea of proportions and
Oh, that's
tempos
right
that
on.
speed up, but the math involved, oh my God. The calculations so
Oh my
that
goodness.
everything was in proportion, but still added up to 12 minutes. Oh my God. There are so many pages of little charts. And it's like, are there going to be 5 sections? Are there going to be 6 sections? How does this work out? And another big challenge with writing that particular piece is that normally when I'm writing a piece, it starts with an extra musical idea. It's a
Okay.
poem, it's a piece of visual art, it's a word that I found in the dictionary, it's a turn of phrase, it's some experience that I had, it's the weather, it's the earth, it's astronomy, it's science, it could be any of those things. That's where it
Oh,
starts. And then you start to focus and you start to generate sound ideas
oh
that
yeah.
come from that. Um, and then you figure out what it is that you're imagining, and then you figure out what the tempo is. And you figure out, well, how fast is that? You work it out and you get your little metronome on your phone and you tap it out. And okay, that's quarter note 72. And I couldn't do that with this piece. It wasn't
No.
about finding the tempo of the music that I'm imagining. It was that I had to find the music that fit the tempo that I was imagining. It was the
Oh,
exact opposite, and it was really hard. When I
well, I'm
got into
glad you
kind
went
of
the
this,
distance.
yeah, I mean, kind of when you get kind of into this middle moderate tempo, it's my music tends to go to extremes, and I mean, Chimera is a microcosm of that because it goes from very slow to
To
very
very
fast. But my music in general, it does go to extremes. It goes from very soft to very loud, which drives recording engineers mad. It goes from very slow. If it's going to be slow, it's going to be really slow. If it's going to be fast, there's going to be a moment where it's really fast. So much music gets kind of written kind of here,
yeah, in the middle.
and I like to go all the way out. Um, so
No, that
yeah,
is that's
so
it's so apparent to me, Jeff. Like when you have described this is one of the things that I found so interesting, especially with music. There's not a word said in this song, by the way. Like what you've put together in this piece, there's not a word, and yet it tells a story to our 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 being. Like that's why I said it's so interesting when you start to pull it apart. Like you just make it goes from like the 2D that you experience into this 3D extravaganza that you're going like, oh my goodness. And yet it comes back to being this is just a piece of beauty. It's just it's so like it's so interesting how you articulate what you went through because I think it's so much better than to say, well, I just sat down and figured it out.
well, oh well. I mean,
It's just expands. It's
I appreciate all that you're saying. It's
you know what this does to me though? Sorry to interrupt you here,
yeah.
Jeff, but it really wants me to hear scar tissue. That's what this is prompting me to go into, right? So, but
Well,
it's
someday hopefully you will be able to hear that.
oh, I
But
will be. I will be. But it's just it's one of those things that I'm finding very interesting of how like you've talked about even how the math and adding it up. Like you just don't think of that connected with music that your ear's going to hear.
well, and I don't want you as a listener to be thinking, "Oh, I really loved the proportions of that piece." Right? I want you to be
Exactly.
in the moment and just be taken along.
Oh,
That's all the stuff that I put in. And when I talk about um, wanting to have something for an audience that listens with their head, I mean, the reality is that you heard a live performance of Chimera, and you may never hear another one.
yeah.
I mean, that's the reality. There's so many pieces out there. Live performance is an amazing thing, but
Oh, yeah.
it's a very rarefied thing. You may not hear that again, and so there needs to be something for those people sitting in the audience at that concert that they can take away from them. But at the same time, if let's say the Griffin Trio records it or someone else records it, or there are more concerts that people hear it more times, like the same individual hears it more times, that when they hear it again, they find something more in it.
Yes.
That's part of the people who listen with their heads. It's like, I really, that was so interesting. That color or what
Yep.
happened there, that was so interesting. And the next time I want them to find more things. And
Yes.
I will tell you part of why that's important to me is that I will not name the composer. It's an American composer who is now not with us.
Mm.
So it could be safe for me to say this person's name, but I won't. I years ago, when I was still fledgling as a composer,
Yes.
I was at a concert in Toronto and I heard a piece that I thought was just incredible. The
Oh, wow.
colors and the textures and where it went, and it was fantastic. And I think that was the Esprit Orchestra in Toronto, which focuses on contemporary music. And then a couple of years later, the Toronto Symphony was going to be playing it. And I was
Oh,
like, I loved this piece. I'm going. I'm going to hear this piece again. And when I heard it again, I realized that I had gotten everything out of it the first time.
oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, so you,
And then I heard another piece some years later in Cleveland. I heard a wind ensemble piece by the same composer, and I thought, oh, that's just this other piece with a different name and wind ensemble. So it was, and
oh, okay.
let's pretend that the composer's name is Joe Blow. I
Yes.
mentioned this to my teacher, Donald Erb. Wonderful, just gave me so much as a composer. Um, I told him this story. I said, I heard the wind ensemble piece and thought that was exactly this other piece. And he said, that's because you didn't hear a Joe Blow piece. You heard the Joe Blow piece.
Oh, oh, okay.
And it reminded it, I mean, I think of that because,
Yep.
you know, I've got post-it notes. I don't know if you can read
Yes.
that backwards. That I've these post-it notes on my computer. So I have a post-it note that says risk, and it's a reminder that
That's a cool.
whenever I write a new piece, that I'm always trying something that I'm not 100% is going to
Ah,
work.
you're out of the safety zone.
Yeah, and Dr. Erb used to say that. He used to say, try this and have a plan B in mind.
Ah,
So that if you go into rehearsal and something's not working, especially if it's an orchestra piece, you know, where every minute costs money.
right.
If they're reading through your piece and something's not working, you can say, you know what, that bit is not working. Can you do this instead? And so know what your plan B is. So I always try to do something that I'm not 100% certain is going to work. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, so it's educated guesses.
Oh, yeah.
But I take a risk with every piece. And another one, you can't read it because I think it's backwards, but it's I am the first audience.
Ah, yes.
And that's a
Yes.
reminder that I don't want to write any music that I'm not personally interested in listening
Right.
to.
I love
Um,
that comment. I love that comment because the reason why I say that is often I'll hear, whether it's in the writing world or whatever, people will say, what's your target audience? And you kind of say, you just said, I would often say, well, me first. And I love that you,
Absolutely.
because to me, that's actually honesty. Because I kind of think we all do it that way. But we somehow or other got this lingo that, well, let's go to this target audience. And I'm kind of going like, then things get really messed up, if you ask me,
Well, you
because it's not
know,
from your heart anymore.
yeah. And one thing that composers get asked a lot is, do you write for yourself or do you write for the audience? And
Yes.
and I mean sometimes that question, what's under that question is, are you trying to challenge us as an audience if we don't want to be challenged, or you
Right.
know, something like that. But the reality is that we're all the audience, and I
Yes.
told you the audiences that I'm trying to write for, but I'm
Oh, yeah.
also writing for myself as an audience, and I'm a very visual composer. So when I'm working, if I'm writing a piece for the Griffin Trio, for example, I'm going to be writing, but I'm picturing sitting in a hall and watching them play it,
Hmm.
or an
Yep.
orchestra or whatever it is. I'm immersed because music is theater. It doesn't matter if it's
Yep.
just concert music, it's still theater, because as soon as you walk out on a stage, it's theater,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
And it's a
Hmm.
participatory thing, it's a live thing. That's what excites me as a composer, is that triangle of composer, performer, and audience. That it's three parts
Yeah.
of an equilateral triangle. And I want to invite people in, and that doesn't mean that I'm writing music that, for a certain audience member might find challenging, and a
Right.
certain
Right.
audience member might find it too challenging. It's interesting because I it's kind of something for someone else to answer. It's hard for us to answer it for ourselves
Sure.
as
Sure.
composers, but where do we fit in terms of how our music is viewed? And I would say um, that my music, for some people, is too modern, and for other people,
Okay.
it's not modern enough. Like there are certain
Yep.
groups that where his music has too much appeal for audiences. And it's not that my music is dumbed down in any way. Like there's a lot of thought and craft and what happens to that idea and what happens to that sound and how does this transform. So I'm kind of writing for that swath of audience that's in the middle.
Mm.
Um, the people that are looking for really avant-garde stuff, that's not me. And they're
Right.
going to look at my music and think, oh, that's not contemporary enough. Um, and there are the people that only want to hear Mozart and Haydn,
Right. The
who are
tradition.
going to look at my music and think, oh, that's too modern for me, and that's fine, because there's every music has its audience. So the
Yep.
really avant-garde pieces, there's an audience for that music. The very what you might call easy listening classical music, there's an audience for that music, and that's all valid, right? So
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
it's really interesting to kind of reflect. I mean, now that I've been doing this for 30 years, um,
Amazing.
to think about kind of, well, where does my music fit in the whole ecosystem? I don't really know. I just keep trying to do better and be interesting and reach audiences. So
Well, it's in many ways to me, it's the listener that's the categorization. Like as the composer, you're kind of it's part of you. And I think like well, it seems a human kind of condition that we've got to categorize whatever it is we're looking
it's
at, right?
true. It's true. You've got to fit people into their pigeonholes, right?
And it's weird that we're like that because like when something's outside of that, it takes a while to adjust, and then somehow or other it moves its way back into it as kind of a new kind of format. And that's why when you kind of broke down the anatomy of the song, it's of Chimera, it's like, okay, now this is why this impacts me the way it does, right? Because then you, as the listener, you bring your own thing to it. One
Absolutely.
of the things, though, I have to make note of what you said, which I think is just fantastic, and that is, it's the notes you don't put in, or the notes that. So I've had a couple, two that brought this up. So I don't know whether you're familiar with Barry Keane, but he was the drummer for Gordon Lightfoot.
No.
And that's one of his key things of drumming. He says, it's what you leave out. And I thought, that's amazing. Another person is Peter Cardinelli. So he's a drummer, not a drummer, he's a bassist out of Toronto. He's
Mhm.
worked with just about everybody. And he says exactly the same thing. He says, you want to hear the bad notes. And I kind of going like, oh my goodness. And it's so interesting that you kind of said a very like, those are really solid things as people who are composing or playing is a really part of what you're creating. It's amazing to me.
There's a lot of pressure, and this is not a new thing, on composers, and particularly young composers, that you have to find some kind of unusual sound, and you have to,
Mm.
um, if there's a clarinet in your piece, well, as much as it plays, it's never allowed to make a sound like an actual clarinet. That you have to find all of these others. There's so much pressure on young
Yes.
composers to to do that. To
Hmm.
what what kind of extended technique can you use that no one's ever seen before, and it can be such an obstacle
Oh yeah.
for a listener, and for making a lot of music. It's an obstacle, I think, and I really, I do feel for especially younger composers who feel that pressure that, oh, I got to do this because that's what's going to get me a grant, and I
Right.
got to write this kind of music, and if a new music ensemble is going to play my stuff, well, it has to sound like this.
Interesting.
And yeah, and and I do attribute some of my path to growing up training my ear with pop music, right?
No, no
Because I'm
question.
coming at it from a different perspective. And over the years, there have been people who have dismissed my music as not being modern enough, and there were plenty of people who would say, "Oh, that modern stuff," when they hear my
Yeah.
my stuff. But I think over the years of just always taking chances, and I have another little post-it that
I
says
love that risk. Oh yeah.
"Evolve." I have
Yes. Oh yeah.
evolved. Um, it's not just about how in a piece the sound evolves, but how do I evolve as a composer? Those things are all important. I just keep trying to do that, and trying to um, hope that my music finds the audience that's interested in that music.
Well, I
And
think as a listener, often you're kind of like it's almost like a McDonald's thing. Sorry for that word, but it's like with this
make
this is
music.
familiar. It's familiar for me. So and then when this composer, this musician, performer explores what more is there, it's like it's not my McDonald's anymore. And to me, part of that experience is the wonder part is you get to grow with that performer, that composer, that you have to allow that to happen. And for me, that's part of the deal is I get to grow along with them, which is really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. But
When you say that, I think is really neat.
you made an interesting point too earlier that I wanted to respond to, which is one thing about listening to new music. Like, you came to that Griffin Trio concert, and you'd never heard of me, and
Yes,
you'd never heard
absolutely.
any of my music.
Yep.
And so you went in absolutely cold, but also you went in having no idea what you were going to hear. And that's a
Yes.
very scary thing for an audience member. And I think when it comes to a name that they don't recognize, like, it often, if there's a program that's got, a composer from the late 18th century, but it's a name they don't recognize, people think it's a
Yep.
contemporary piece because I don't know that
Uh,
name, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
it's very scary, but at the same time, and you see this in reviews, not that you get a ton of reviews these days, but back when you used to get reviews, um, and it's true of general audience members too, that when you hear something for the first time, it's a very natural thing that you try to relate it to something that you already know.
Interesting.
So
Yes. Yes.
my first string quartet, which is called Quantum Mechanics, talking about science
Oh man,
inspiration.
I love
Uh,
your names.
there was a review. It came out. It's on my first portrait CD. It's actually the title piece on my first portrait CD. But there have been reviews of saying, he's obviously listened to the Bartok string quartets, and my music's not really like the Bartok string quartets, but when you're hearing something that you've never heard before, and you know nothing about that composer, you naturally try to relate it. Oh, it makes me think of Bartok, or oh, it makes me
Uh-huh.
think of Stravinsky. it makes me think of Mozart. For example, if you went to a concert and there was a Mozart piece that you'd never heard before,
Yep.
you don't go into it with the same kind of, I don't know what's going to happen, because you
No.
know what Mozart sounds like. So even though
Correct.
that piece is not familiar to you, you know kind of what's involved. I relate it to when you go to a baseball game, you don't know exactly what's going to happen, but you know how a baseball game works.
Yes. Yes.
If you went to a baseball game and they started playing cricket,
It's, oh my goodness.
that would, yeah,
Yep.
you would be thinking, what's happening here, right?
Great example.
So
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
it's sometimes going to hear a composer whose music you have no idea about is like going to watch a game of a sport that you know nothing about.
Oh,
And
it's
believe me,
very
I know
similar.
nothing about cricket.
Nor I. It's one of those things that you bring up though. It's very interesting because part of that is also what you're bringing in with you when you come to that performance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like if it, and it can be in so many different ways that you don't necessarily hear it. So it's like it's well, that's part of when you say theater, it's a big part of the audience part that you can't have any idea on.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I think one of those things is so difficult. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, what you just said about the young composers and looking for a new sound, right? Like that they're trying and there's lots of pressure for that. And this is a sports kind of analogy, but going to the Bobby Orr story. So
I
we're
wrote him
kind
a
of
fan letter when I was a kid.
so you know. Well, in his one of the biographies or autobiographies he wrote, he said that because he brought creativity into the sport, which I think like that's a big part of what makes the players who are great great. And he said, I got to do things, risk, that in today's sport are absolutely not allowed by a player because the pressure to win and not risk is so high that they got to kind of fit into a certain kind of zone, which made me, when you said that about being a young artist today in the music world, it's kind of a similar, it's funny how society takes us in those roles, right? Because you miss something that could be actually fundamentally changing because you're kind of trying to fit into this other box that for whatever reason it'll sell better, you'll become popular, whatever it is, versus to what you said earlier, putting the post on your screen of risk. Like I, I don't know, I just love that because it means you're constantly reminded that I got to step out.
Yeah.
It might not work, but I got to step out. And when you step out and it works, I'll bet there's no better feeling that
Oh,
like
it's fantastic. But even something that doesn't quite work the way you thought, well, you take what you learned from that into the
oh
next
yeah,
piece, right?
no,
I
for sure.
tend to not do much revision after the fact. Like once
Mm,
when a piece is preparing for a premiere, there's obviously you're going to workshop with the performers or it's the first rehearsal with the orchestra and you find mistakes, you find dynamics that aren't right, you need to change, you need to make a little adjustment here, a little adjustment there. It's like, oh, I took a chance with that, here's my plan B, can we try this instead? And those changes get entered back into the piece. I mentioned that I write with pencil and paper.
yes, yeah.
But once it's all done, then I enter it into the computer so that it looks really pretty, and you can make PDFs and you can send your music out. I mean, that's there are just so many ways now
Oh,
to get our music out there that we didn't have, 30 years ago.
yes, yeah.
So, but I don't. It's very, very, very rare that I would like cut a chunk of music or rewrite a chunk of music. To me, when we've kind of fixed as much as we can fix, and it kind of works, but maybe I'm not 100% happy with it. I don't, chop it up and rewrite things. I just learn from that experience and carry that into the next piece. So, I can look at my really early works and I can see the germ of what's in my music now, 30 years later
Okay.
or more.
Interesting.
Even if some of those pieces I think, well, that didn't really work. Like we all write dogs once in a while. We try to limit the dogs, but some pieces turn
Sure.
out better than others.
Yeah.
Sometimes they fall into place just the way you imagined, and sometimes it's just it's not quite right. But
Well, that's
even
part of the evolution, isn't it?
yes, absolutely. But what's interesting is that I can look back at those early pieces and think, well, I don't want anyone to hear that piece, but I can see this thing about my music is already there, and this thing about my music is already there. I have a friend who's a violinist, and one thing that tends to show up in my music are things like syncopated rhythm, where that might be kind of climactic and energetic, and
Yes.
she calls things like that Jeffisms, because it's the kind of thing where you really have to woodshed it. You really have to practice it under tempo and work it up. And then when it's in your body, you have to let it go. And then it just happens. And it's a thrill to play. But
That's
she
cool.
says, whenever I see those things, I just think, oh, that's a Jeffism. Yeah, I'm going to have to work on that bit. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting with you can even reflect like they have your DNA, they have your signature on them, no matter where in the evolution they take place, it's still there, and you can hear it. That's the part that's kind of neat too.
It would be curious if some musicologist or theorist at some point, maybe when I'm long gone, would kind of look at
Oh,
an early piece and a middle piece, and if when I get to a point where I have my early period and my middle period, my late period,
yeah.
that whether someone coming from outside could look at that and see, oh yeah, I see that
No,
connection, I see this
that
evolution. Who knows?
so Jeffrey, is this kind of, do you live with this like 724? Like, is this something like, can you be in a restaurant and something's coming, you see, or being on a trail hiking or downtown seeing somebody, like, I kind of steal this from Jerry Seinfeld because he says, I'm 724 of trying to find things that are fun. And people say that's exhausting, and he calls it a gift. He says, there's no better gift in the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have that sense with music? Like, is it like you're always like, oh, you see a painting or whatever it is, you can just, and because you mentioned color in composing, and so I just wondered, like, is that kind of with you all the time?
There is always music playing at some level in my head, and
Oh, okay. Yes.
it's often pop music. But for example, music cannot be a background thing for me. So when I used to go to
Mm.
yoga classes, I should still go to yoga classes, but when I used to go to yoga classes, um, I could not be in yoga classes where they were playing music, because I would be listening to the music and analyzing the chord changes and
Ah,
all of
really?
that. It was never a background thing. When I'm in a restaurant, I hear a song that I recognize, then it's playing in my head. But the music that's out there, it's always speaking to me. And so the conversation that we might be having is under the music, if you like. And
Yes.
even, and the pop world, I think of a lot of pop music
Yes.
as kind of like Esperanto. There's um or it's a word with it's a language with 25 words. There are only so many sentences that you can make,
Right.
right? And
Yep. Yep.
there can be quite a bit of variety, but there's only so many sentences you can make with those 25 words. So, I mean, I've had the experience of sitting in a restaurant with my partner, and some song plays, and I start singing backup vocals to it, because I used to do a lot of backup vocals
Oh, of
because
course
I
you did.
learned from
Yes.
Shirley Jones.
Yes.
Um, I start I start singing along, and I start harmonizing, and he'll say, "Do you know that song?" I said, "No, I've never heard it before." But there's only so many, in pop
Yep.
music, a chord happens. There's only so many chords it's going to go to, and the way
Right.
that you use pattern and motive and things like that, it's much more um, restricted, which is not. That sounds like a negative word, um, but it's just there aren't as many ideas there.
Right.
So
It's not so varied.
there's a lot more repetition. Um, so yeah, I know where it's going next, because it's like it's in 4/4, and there are 4-bar phrases, and we ended on the dominant, and now it's the chorus, and so I can learn those things really fast, and I can anticipate
Yes.
things. And I mean, I was born to be backup. That's that's
Well,
my whole life.
it kind of kills me when you said you used to sing the background to Partridge Family
I
songs, right?
still do. And nowadays there's the technology, and you can find them on YouTube, of
Oh,
of people who can they have the software to remove the lead vocals but leave
yes.
everything else.
Oh, I know.
And
It's
so I've
crazy.
got some of those, that it's like I can really listen to all of the background vocals and how it's been put together and all the parts, and I'm in heaven when I hear those things.
Well, they were so important to the music.
Yeah.
Like you almost don't necessarily, when you hear those songs now, you don't recognize to the point. But without that chorus, without that background, they would not have been the songs they were.
And the Wrecking Crew, which was they were the
Oh,
instrumentalists, who were
yes,
on everything
yes.
at that time in music history. Yeah, it was just this magic sauce that came together. And I was not in it for David Cassidy. I wanted to be Laurie Partridge. I wanted to play the piano
Yes.
and
Yep.
sing backup. And eventually I got to be Laurie Partridge because I played
The
piano and I sang backup in the Mary Knickel band with my friend
Oh,
Mary
wow.
Knickel, who now lives in Lunenburg, but I knew her in Toronto, and she
Oh,
wrote kind
wow.
of East Coast songs, and I
Oh,
was
cool.
I was one of her backup singers and her keyboardist, and it was super duper fun. And also,
Oh,
when
yeah.
I was at school in Cleveland, one of the jobs that I had was I conducted and did arrangements for a professional a cappella synagogue choir at a very big synagogue in Cleveland, and they had a
Oh, wow.
youngish cantor who was from England, was not a whole lot older than me, but he was coming from a pop and musical theater background, and
Okay.
he had, in
Yep.
fact, fun fact, when he was still in England, he was David Cassidy's understudy in a science fiction musical
Oh,
that I didn't go to when I was in London one time, but I thought, do I want to go to that? And I ended up going to something else. Um, but
oh, wow.
but he actually knew, had been David Cameron's
Work, Dave.
understudy,
Oh,
so it was like worlds colliding. But anyway, he had a lot of traditional synagogue music that I kind of revised and rewrote for this a cappella choir, who were largely Cleveland Institute of Music singers, so they had a really high level of ability.
oh, wow.
So I could write really complicated stuff,
And
but
they could
he
do it.
also brought his own melodies, and he was very much, I want a carpenter's sound here. I want a
Okay.
carpenter's chord. And the carpenter's background vocals would have these
Oh,
really
yeah.
dense added tone chords. So I would be writing those kinds of things, and it was great because I really got to work on my choral chops, um, learn about older choral arranging, but write these pop jazz a
Oh my
cappella
goodness.
choir arrangements that were so much fun. And then he would, every year there'd be the equivalent of a church basement show. There'd be a shul basement show, and I would do the backup. I would write the backup vocals, and the choir would sing some, or sometimes I'd be one of a trio of background singers, and it was great.
Oh my
But
goodness.
also, and I mean, I think this is when young composers ask me now about forging a career, and it's different now than when
Uh,
I was starting my career, and we can talk about some of that. But you have to be very lateral thinking, and so the fact that I was doing my doctorate in music, but I was writing a cappella synagogue music, and I was writing background vocals, and I was singing background vocals, and just all of these things. Like, we have to draw on so
oh
many
yeah.
different sources to forge a career. You know, I never wanted to pursue a university position.
Mm.
I did teach a little bit in Cleveland, um, but I taught at CIM for a year in the theory department full time, and then I taught part time at Baldwin Wallace College, Conservatory of Music. It's a university now. Um, but what I was finding was that I wanted to write music. I
Yeah.
loved teaching. I love teaching. I believe that a teacher, if you're going to be a university professor, you need to be giving 100% to that.
Yes.
It's not a thing that funds your writing. It's You're
Right.
there for the
Oh.
students first. So I love that. But what I was finding was that I was in Cleveland so much that I wasn't getting commissions from Americans because I was Canadian. I wasn't
Ah.
getting commissions from Canadians because I was away
Yes, you're in
so
America.
much. So
You're in no man's
I
land.
wasn't meeting people. I was in this in between place.
Ah.
So I decided at age 34 to quit my teaching position and move back to Toronto full time, and gave myself
Okay.
till I was 40 to start to make a mark. Because, I mean, certainly as a composer, you have to have gotten some kind of attention by the time you're
Right.
40, or I mean, realistically, there just isn't really time.
Right.
So I gave myself till I was 40. Um, Virtually the day that I moved back to Toronto, which was like first thing in July, I got a call from
Wow.
Susan Haig, who was at that time the music director of the Windsor, Ontario Symphony.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I had met her at a conference, and I had sent her some stuff just out of the blue, my doctoral composition, which was a big piece for soprano and orchestra, some other things. Um, we had a conversation, and she called me and said, "We've been offered this pilot project of a 3-week residency through the SOCAN Foundation, that where they're looking for a composer that would come for 3 weeks through the season, and we'd have various
Oh
things to
wow.
do. Are you interested in being that person?" And it was simply because I'd met her at a conference, and it happened that wasn't there for the whole conference, and I showed up in one of the conference rooms while everybody else was on lunch, and she was in there too, and we chatted, and
Oh wow.
she kind of thought about my name, and she said, "Did you send me something?" And I said, "Yeah, I did. I sent you this piece for soprano and orchestra, and you wrote me a really kind note back." And I had sent it knowing that the resources required for that piece are too big for the Windsor Symphony, but it was a calling card, right?
Sure.
And I said, "You wrote me a really, really nice note back." And she said, "I wrote to you?" And she said, "Okay, so you must have made an impression." And then she said, "Did you have a marimba concerto?" And I said, "Yes, I do, a chamber concerto." And it was written for the percussionist in her orchestra. And she kind of filed that away
Interesting.
and programmed that piece later. And that, that opened up things. And that was immediate. And when I turned 40 was when I got the gig as composer in residence with the Vancouver Symphony. And I thought, well, I
Okay.
guess I keep
Okay.
doing this. I had been
Yeah.
doing a kind of a junior residency with the Toronto Symphony. I'd had, a bunch of things, but I was doing a lot of lateral thinking in terms of working in the classroom with music projects and creation projects. And I did a number of years with a program through the conservatory called Learning Through the Arts, which linked the arts with school curricula and
Okay. Okay.
helping teachers find ways to use the arts in their teaching, which was super rewarding. And that program still exists. So those were all things that kind of just, as a
Yeah.
freelancer, you got to ride the wave.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was never a direct path. But at that time, the CBC was picking up every new music concert everywhere for broadcast. So things that
Yeah.
I wrote for Windsor, the CBC was coming and picking up the concert, and then it would get a national broadcast, and there'd
That's
be an
pretty cool. Yeah.
interview. You'd go into the CBC headquarters for an interview. It's like, it was amazing. I remember my first interview. There used to be a show called 2 New Hours, which was around for a long, long, long time. And
I
just
think I remember this show.
my first going in for my first interview with 2 New Hours and thinking, I mean, for any composer, that was, I've arrived. I'm having an interview on 2 New Hours. This is incredible.
No kidding.
So the CBC was there, and they would not only pick up the concert, but at the end of the concert, the producer would meet you backstage and hand you a cassette
Oh, wow.
or a CD eventually. And the exposure that composers of that generation could get because of the supports that were out there,
Amazing.
it was amazing. And it's really challenging for younger composers now because those
Don't exist.
resources are not there. They're not there. They have to find other ways to get their music out there. And there are other ways, thanks to our friend the internet and thanks to PDFs. And there are lots of ways now, other avenues to get your music out there. But there's also been a cultural shift over the last few decades of that the creation of art is funded by the people who use the art, whether that's an audience or a granting program or public money, which I totally believe in. We all pay through our taxes this tiny bit of money that makes art happen. I totally believe in that. But the shift is now that it's not the user who pays for the art, it's the artist who pays for the art.
Okay.
An audience expects to be able to go on Spotify and listen to recordings for free.
Right.
And the pandemic made a big difference with that because a lot of stuff, if you were going to hear any music, you had to hear it online, and it was largely free. And so that kind of cemented it, I think. But, the royalties that we get from Spotify are minuscule. The kind of ways that recordings get produced or live concerts, it's all on the artists. And that has been a cultural shift. And it's made it really, really challenging to find your way and to make a career as an artist sustainable, which I think in any culture should be possible.
I agree. I think it's one of the big things that is kind of lacking, and it's a shift. I go back to what you said right at the beginning when Petula Clark had Downtown out, and your dad went all over trying to find the 45. And I can remember even growing up, and you can remember this too, is how music and culture has changed if it's not online. But the anticipation of your favorite artist's new album.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
and you had not a lot of ways to find out that it was coming out, but when
exactly.
you did, and the anxiousness to go down to the record store, like Sam the Record Man or whatever, and get that album and then rush home and then you play that first side or whatever and the second side. And all of that is gone.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
unless you're like way up there with the aficionado person that's like very rare, it's completely missing. And to me, it's made music in a way, almost in a sense, how do I say this without sounding offensive, but valueless? Because people aren't anxious to go out. Like on Spotify, your monthly fee to listen to it wherever you are, any recording, is what a CD or an album used to cost you. And that's what I mean. It's like it becomes so accessible that it's, to your point, I think it's changed the culture enormously and not for the good, unfortunately.
But at the same time, the proliferation of recordings online from all kinds of different
Oh,
cultures has totally opened up our ears
no question.
to all kinds of different ways of making music, and learning about how people in different parts of the world make music and what is music to them. Um, that is a wonderful thing about the internet.
Absolutely.
And yeah, going down a rabbit hole of even just YouTube videos of
Oh,
different concerts, that things get
yes.
recommended and suddenly several hours have gone by. Because,
Well, what I think is really intriguing what you're saying. I'm interrupting you again,
no,
Jeff, and I'm
but
sorry about that.
no,
But
I'm doing my
you
Irish thing of just not stopping
you
talking.
you figured out though how to do this. And that's kind of the point that I was trying to bring out, is that there's still a way that makes it happen. And like I think it might have been Roman Boris when he was on from the Griffin Trivial, and he was talking about there is a hustle. But there's always been a hustle. Like there's always been a thing that you had to do, right? And then there's breaks. There's way more of it. Like that's the kind of cool thing, is like you want to hear any song, you can like pull your phone out and hear it. That's very cool. Like, which
But
we couldn't do
right,
when we had albums around.
right. But the idea of, for example, my first portrait CD, Quantum Mechanics,
Oh, I
is
love that
is
title, by the way.
six. Thank you. It's six, I think, six pieces, and it's very much curated in terms of the flow of the six pieces. So it starts with a solo violin piece with Annalie Patapatanakun from the Griffin Trio.
No way.
Yeah. And she has to scream and sing and do all kinds of things in it. Um, and then it goes into a string quartet, and then it goes into a string nonet, and then it goes into a mixed quartet with a couple of strings and a harp and and flute, and then
Oh,
it goes into harp and percussion, and then it goes into my marimba concerto, which is percussion and an ensemble of 8 instruments. It's called 2x4. Um, so,
this is the one you sent to Susan Hay.
yeah, that marimba concerto.
Yes.
Um, so that program, that hour of music, it's thought through as a progression in
Yes.
terms of the kinds of colors that are a part of that. Nobody listens to music that way anymore. As you said, they might listen to the Rumba Concerto, they might listen to
Yes.
Mechanics, but they also don't get that connection. And I still think of programming in that kind of way. And if you're programming a live concert, I think you have to think about those things. For
Absolutely.
years, when I was working with the symphony, I produced a new music chamber orchestra series at the Roundhouse in Vancouver, and it was 3 concerts a season. It was all music from the last 30 years, and it
Oh,
was it was
beautiful.
a huge success. I'm grateful for that. We didn't know what was going to happen. The space, we set it up for 250 people, and the day before the first concert was going to happen, I went to the rehearsal and I said, I need to tell you all that this is now off sale because it's already sold out.
Oh,
And when I
wow.
walked out to welcome everyone at the first concert and introduce the first piece, it was a sea of gray hair. People talk about how, it's,
Yes.
gray hairs, the OAPs, they just want to hear, Mozart and Beethoven and Brahms and all of those. And it was a sea of older
Interesting.
people who wanted to hear something different than what they hear, than what a symphony keeps handing them. And
That's cool.
that's what people said. We're here
Yeah.
because, it's like, oh, I don't want to hear Tchaikovsky 4 again.
Again.
I'm gonna, oh, here's this. Let's hear this. And yeah, and I tried to program as thoughtfully as I could, and program that interested me as an audience member and that flowed together. And there was a theme for every program, and there were many ways to enter what we were doing, and
Wow.
it was a big success. I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud that Bramwell Tovey. I mean, it started because the symphony was going to go bankrupt, and they were going to have concerts at the Chance Center that were going to be Baroque and early
Yep.
classical music. So that meant that a lot of the players who were on contract were going to be paid to stay home. So they instead split the orchestra. So some people were playing at the Chan, and other people were available to me to play at the Roundhouse. So I had to program within those limitations. There were many parameters. I couldn't hire a lot of extra people. There was a lot that I had to think about. And this got announced at a programming committee meeting. And Bramwell said, we're going to split the orchestra, and there's going to be a new music for chamber large ensemble. And Jeff, you're going to do it. You're going to program it. And I need to know I need to have 3 programs ready in 3
Oh,
weeks
wow.
so they could go into the brochure. It's like, okay, I'll come up with 3 programs in 3 weeks and they'll go into the brochure. Sure. So the first year was put together quite quickly with a lot of music that I knew and liked and that I knew was going to work. But I'm
Interesting.
so pleased that he came up with that idea and handed it to me and said, "This is going to be your baby. I need to sign off on the programs, but you're gonna do all the work for it." I'm like, great, okay, cool.
So
Yeah.
in a way, Owen, your mentor, was a great think out of the box like that.
Early on, yeah. Early on, Owen started that, and then Bramwell, of course, at the VSO. Just I have so much to thank him
Wow.
for. Um, when we sat down at the beginning of my residency to kind of think through the years ahead and what kinds of pieces I might like to write and what else I would do, he said, I want you to write something that you might not get commissioned to write, like a bigger
Oh.
piece. So I ended
Oh,
up,
that's cool.
these weren't the only pieces that I wrote, but I wrote a concert opener kind of piece. I kind of thought of it as, what if there was a program of all Jeffrey Ryan? And I'll tell you, as an aside, any program of one composer, I don't care who the composer is, that's boring programming because you get one voice. You're getting
Interesting
one
comment.
voice.
Yeah. Yes.
But so I wrote a concert opener, and then we included my triple concerto for the Griffins. And
Oh,
then
cool.
there's a full length symphony, which is not like full length. It's like, I think 35 minutes, something like that. But it was the longest piece that I had written to that point. Now, the reality is that an orchestra is not going to call up me or pretty much any composer and say, we would like to commission you to write a second act of a concert symphony, 35, 40 minutes.
Yes.
That's not going to happen because it's impossible to find the funding for that.
Right. Right.
Like there's just so many obstacles to that. and it's a ton of real estate on a concert that an orchestras are incredibly risk averse in a lot of ways.
No doubt.
Bramwell had a really balanced approach to risk, but he took risks, and so I appreciate that in a music director. But it's a lot of real estate. So the fact that Bramwell said, "I want you to do something like that because this is your chance," I'm grateful for that.
Wow.
And then they did a recording of those
Oh.
three pieces of, this 12-minute concert opener, a 25-minute triple concerto, and then a
Oh wow.
35-minute symphony. And it launched the Naxos Canadian Classic Series, a series that doesn't exist anymore, but mine was the first one.
Oh.
And so, it also got recorded. And so we had kind of planned it as at some point down the road, we would like to put out a recording of the music that you've written for us. So think along
Oh
those
wow.
lines. And so that's how that came about. And in the years following, eventually I was asked to write longer and longer works. We all start writing out 12-minute pieces, 10-minute pieces, 15-minute pieces, chamber music, orchestral music, what have you. I did reach a point in my career where people were asking me to write bigger things, an hour-long sextet for
Oh
a
boy.
dance piece, right? That was going like, I love collaboration. I love collaborating with other genres. And so to write for dancers where the
Oh.
6 musicians are going to be
Mm.
live on stage, that's incredible. To write for singers and involve movement, that's a fantastic thing. Just any kind of collaboration
Oh.
is really great for me. I can see that the sun is shining through. You're getting.
You've got some
I've
sunlight
got
coming
some
up in
sun. We have
Vancouver.
sun. We have sun here in Vancouver. I know in the winter that can be a yes or a no, but it's a nice day today. Yeah.
Oh no, it's always nice to see it come in. It's like a giving you a sense of brightness that is kind of bringing and color to the picture.
Yes.
But when you get asked, like, are you like, does that really energize you when you get asked to do something of length like that? Like, is that like just open up like a full like thing to you, or is that like too intimidating to almost
You know
like
what?
imagine?
Doug? I would say anytime someone asks me to write something for them, that's a gift, and that's
Okay,
an
that's
investment and a belief in what I do. So whether it's a short piece or whether it's a long piece, I'm grateful for all of it.
that's
At
cool.
the same time, the way that you structure a 10-minute piece or a 12-minute piece is very different from the way that you structure a 40-minute piece or a 60-minute piece,
Oh wow,
right?
yeah,
So, the
yes.
dance piece that I wrote, that's an hour. And so you've got to think about, it's not just about where's the high in that piece, but it's where's the high-ish and then the high-ish higher, and then where's the calm, and where,
Oh yeah.
you've got to think in that larger scale. Um, so when, I have an hour-long oratorio called Afghanistan Requiem for a Generation that I wrote with poet Suzanne Steele. And that was originally a commission from the Calgary Phil. And it's got a full orchestra, it's got 4 soloists, it's got a grown-up choir, it's got a children's choir.
Whoa.
I've written for all of those things, but I've never written for all of those things in one piece.
Together.
So, it was like here's my opportunity to pull on all of these different directions and threads that I've explored, but now put it into one piece, and to work with a living poet,
Oh yeah.
and to help shape what that text looks like so that it works musically, and all of that. That is a much bigger undertaking.
Oh yeah.
So I'm happy to have a 12-minute chamber piece that I might write in 3 months. An hour-long piece is, including the time to put it in the computer and get all the parts, that's close to a year.
Really? Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
man.
So yeah, I mean, the Afghanistan Requiem for a Generation. That would have been pushing it, a 9-month job. A year would have been better. Unfortunately, the poetry was finished rather late, so I had to do the 9 months in 6.
Ah, okay. Yes.
So that was a big challenge. Amazingly, I managed to do it. So I also learned that if time is really tight, I am actually capable of not answering the phone and getting up at 9 and working till bedtime, or starting work at 9 and working till bedtime, and 7 days a week, and I can actually get this done. I don't
Wow.
recommend it, and I don't want to do that again.
Right. But you
But
could do it.
and something like scar tissue, for example, which you mentioned, is a 40-minute piece. It's intense.
I feel like you're reading my mind because that's where I'm going next.
Well, that's that again is working with a living poet, Michael Redhill.
Yes, so this was going to be my comment, because like he's a novelist as well.
Yeah.
So
and
how do you get
yes,
how do you get connected with these poets and writers to do this as well?
In that case,
what a thrill.
I think he lives down the road from Roman. So Scar Tissue is a piece for Nordic Voices, which is a 6-voice a cappella vocal ensemble from Oslo, and for the Griffin Trio. And we were looking for partnerships. There's a whole story about how that came together, but they wanted to have some poetry by a living poet, which I am totally on board with. It's not just music of our time, it's words of our time, and that is so important. Roman knew Michael, and so kind of connected all of this, and I found Nordic Voices. We were looking for an a cappella vocal ensemble, and I was doing some internet research, and we had seen a few, and I was listening to some recordings, and I somehow stumbled across Nordic Voices, and then I stumbled across the fact that they were going to be singing a concert in Vancouver. And I went, I'm going. It's going to do a little recon, and went to their concert. I think Vancouver New Music was presenting them at the Annex downtown. So I got my ticket, and I didn't reach out to them beforehand or anything like that. It's like, this is just reconnaissance. And I loved what they did, and I loved their sound. And I sought them out afterwards in the lobby and found one of them, and I said, this is who I am. And I'm talking with the Griffin Trio, which is a trio here in Canada. We're looking for a collaboration. Are you interested in having a conversation? And they went, yes, here's the person you need to talk to. And it's been, it was such an incredible collaboration. It was one of the initial supporters was an American group called Sounds of Science Commissioning Club, which supports music creation of pieces that connect in some way to science. So based on everything I've said already, totally my jam.
No kidding.
And Michael talked with the founder of that group, Glenn Prestwich, who is a biochemist, who was exploring ways to heal scar tissue from the inside. And Michael saw that as a great springboard for the kinds of scars that we carry and the kinds of ways that we move on from a wound and that kind of thing. And he came up with this 9-poem structure of kind of what nature is and what the wound is and the recovery. So 3 and 3 and 3. And we had a conversation early on about kind of what he was thinking. And these are the kinds of things that you have in collaborations when you're
Oh,
able to
amazing.
work with a living poet. You have
Unbelievable.
this initial conversation about kind of what are we thinking? What are we thinking? We get a sense of getting ourselves on the same page. And then Michael wrote this poetry and sent it to me, and it just immediately spoke music to me. I was hearing all kinds of things. Even the fact that the 8th of the 9 poems, the first word was phosphatidylinositol. And,
I'm impressed you can say that.
phosphatidylinositol, well, I had to practice it just like I had to practice Annalie Patabotanicum.
Yes,
But
yes.
now it
We
just
all do
rolls
that.
off the tongue. Yeah, phosphatidylinositol, I thought, okay, that's I can work with that. And it actually became the foundation of the whole movement of just the 3
Oh,
women in the ensemble singing this little line in the canon that becomes the foundation for that whole movement. And it was interesting because, of course, Michael sent the poetry to Roman, and Roman called me and said, "Well, what did you think?" And he was probably looking at words like phosphatidylinositol and thinking, "What's Jeff going to do with that?" And I said, "I love it. I love everything
oh,
about this
wow.
poetry. I hear so much sound with this, and just being able to then be with those words and imagining Nordic voices, the 6 singers and the 3 instrumentalists, and how they can be together. And sometimes the violin and the cello are the 7th and 8th voice, and the piano is the percussion, and
Oh,
so like just different ways. What are all the different ways that I can use these 9 people to take the audience on the journey from the joy of having a body to a wound, to recovering from it, and to moving on. And
oh,
it was such a satisfying creation process. Plus, we got to workshop it in Oslo. It was a real partnership of trying things. And I had gone early on. Nordic Voices was doing a concert in Portland, Oregon. And I
okay.
remember it was Valentine's Day of that year. And I got on a plane. I flew to Portland in the morning. We spent an hour and a half around the table where they told me about their voices and what kinds of things they can do. Um, then we had lunch. Then I got on a plane and I went home all in one day. And it was so great because it set me up to write something that really suited them. And that's the way it is when you write. I love writing for singers. I love writing for singers
That's
because
crazy.
every voice is distinctive. Um, and you get the opportunity to talk with those singers. And I have a whole list of questions that I ask a singer that I haven't written for before. What's your top public note? Because
Oh,
singers
man.
sing higher than their public note, right?
Right,
But it's
right,
like,
right.
what's your top public note? What's your lowest
Interesting.
bottom note? What are some things that you feel your voice does really, really well that you like to show off? And sometimes the answer to that question is not, well, I feel like I'm really good at this or I'm really good at this. Well, sometimes the answer to that question is, well, there's a lot of things that I enjoy doing, but here are a few things that I've been asked to do that I really hated. And I'm like,
Ah,
okay, that's good too. That's good to know.
yeah, for sure.
And what's some repertoire what are some songs, for example, when I was writing for Christina Szabo and the Emily Carr songs, what are some songs that you really like singing that you feel really fit you like a glove?
Ah,
And so many singers have said, well, here's a song that song cycle that I really like, and here's one that really fits me. and so on. And I can get a sense of where that person's voice is. So whether it's writing for Christina or writing for Tyler Duncan or writing for Colin Ainsworth or so many of the amazing singers that I've had the chance to write for,
Wow.
I get to know their voices and I get to write something that really shows them off, that
Yes.
they can just really embrace and feel like, hopefully, this composer understands what my voice does, and I love singing this piece. That's really what you want. You want that, I mentioned earlier,
Oh yeah.
that triangle of composer, performer, and audience.
Yes.
That you want the composer and the performer to really speak to each other. And when you add in the layer of the poetry, and especially when it's a living poet, and maybe they're writing something new for the project, or maybe it's just from their existing work, and you're finding things that speak music to me. You get to have those conversations. I've just I have a premiere coming up in March of songs for soprano and string quartet for the Penderecki Quartet at Laurier.
This is on your website or something, because I've seen this.
It's coming up on March 15th, part of the Laurier's 50th anniversary season, me being an early grad.
Yeah.
And I had found a few years ago, listened to the weekend CBC morning radio show that at that time was hosted by Cheryl McKay. And, it's the kind of show where it wasn't that I listened to the whole show, but, you wake up in the morning and you don't really want to get out of bed quite yet. You turn on the radio.
Yes.
And it's tuned to CBC. So, I heard Cheryl McKay interviewing this poet named Yusuf Sadi. And he read some of his poetry. He just had his first collection published called Pluviophile. And I could hear the love of language, but he was also really interested in astronomy and all of these things. Oh my God. It's like, I have to get five. So I went out and ordered the book and just started putting Post-it notes on all these poems that spoke music to me. And then this project came up, and there were a number of poems that Yusuf had written. And by this time, Yusuf was living in Montreal, and he is still living in Montreal. But he had a number of poems that referenced the moon in some way, and such beautiful poetry. And so I found 5 poems that referenced the moon, that made a nice progression, and thinking of it as a piece to also show off the Penderecki String Quartet. If you can imagine, think about this: 5 movements. There are 4 spaces, and there are 4 phases of the moon. This is now, eventually it'll be 5 songs, and I'll do something with piano, but as a string quartet piece, it's the quartet is with the singer, and then there's a movement that features the quartet that is about a phase of the moon, and then we have another song, and then we have the next phase of the moon. So it's this continuous, when something like that just kind of falls into place, and you just think, I'm so excited. That just is totally, it's just all fallen into place. But
the hairs are standing up on the back of my neck.
Well,
right and as you describe this, because it's like you woke up and the radio was on. If you'd woken up an hour later, you wouldn't have heard it.
I wouldn't have heard that, and I would never know Yusuf's gorgeous poetry. But now I've connected with him, and and he's just like, I'm going to come to the concert in Waterloo. Like, I can't believe that my words have inspired music, and I get to give that to a poet, which is also an amazing thing. He didn't write anything new for this piece. It's these existing pieces, existing poems, but it's his voice, and his voice is coming through in that music, and it's the singer, and it's a singer. It's Leslie Fagan, whom I had not written for before. So it's getting to know her voice. And I've worked with the Pendereckis before, and they had talked about me writing something new for them. So when this anniversary came up and like I pitched the idea to them, it's like, what do you think? And they went, it sounds great.
Perfect.
Let's
Yeah.
do it. Yeah. So it's interesting because in terms of writing for singers, I wrote a lot early on for singers because when I was in Cleveland, I was hanging out with all the opera singers.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And
That's
I was
cool.
writing for them, and I was, writing for choirs and all of that. And then as a freelancer, if an orchestra rings me up and says we'd like to commission you to write a 10-minute piece to open this program on such and such a date, and like you can't say, you know what, I just wrote an orchestra piece, so
No,
I'm gonna say no, I'm gonna pass.
oh,
You don't have that luxury, right?
no, not at all.
So it's whatever comes along, and it's very interesting because um, I tell younger composers this. I have a whole list of things that I convey to younger composers. So you want to have a career as a composer, here are some things to think about. It's really easy in composers. We talked about this in terms of when you hear a new piece that you kind of imagine, oh, it sounds like this, right? We tend to get pigeonholed. It's very easy to get pigeonholed in the music that first gets you attention. So one of the first prizes that I won as a young composer in the SOCAN Foundation Young Composer Awards was a choral piece. And so it was in the magazine that I'd won first prize in the choral category. And I was talking with another composer, more established than I, at an intermission and at a Toronto Symphony concert. And we were talking about, kind of composer careers and things like that. And he had recognized my name. He said, "Oh, you won a SOCAN prize." Yeah. Oh, yeah, I did. I'm amazed that anybody reads that magazine, let alone remembers my name. And he said, "Oh, yeah." And we were talking about commissions and things. And he said, "Well, how do you find that as a choral composer?" And I said, "Well, I'm not a choral composer. I'm a composer. I won a prize for choral music, but it was the first thing that got me attention. So suddenly, in his mind, I'm a choral composer, right?
Absolutely.
So and you know what? There are people who love writing for chorus so much that that's all they want to do, and there are tons of choirs around who are always thirsty for new music to sing. So you can have a wonderful career writing just choral music, and that's totally fine. That was not for me.
That's not what you're
that
about.
was not what I was looking for. So I really made a conscious effort to write for all kinds of different ensembles. And when I had first come back to Toronto full-time after finishing my doctorate, the first piece that I wrote was quantum mechanics. And the reason why was I did not have a string quartet in my catalog. There are a lot of quartets out in the world who might be interested in playing a new piece by me. So I needed something to send to them. So knowing that my big piece for soprano and orchestra was going to be challenging to program for an orchestra. It was a big orchestra. It had a soloist. It had 3 sopranos in the orchestra as the voice of Ophelia. I mean, amazingly, that piece had its premiere in Cleveland at the school, but then it got programmed and recorded with the Bowling Green Symphony. And then the Toronto Symphony did it. That's incredible for a piece that is challenging to program.
That's very cool. Yes.
But, just I need something I can send out. So I wrote a string quartet, and I wrote it to a deadline for a competition in the States.
Okay.
Because it gave me a deadline.
Yeah.
And it didn't win. it didn't win the competition, but I
But
had,
it went everywhere else.
but I now had a string quartet that I could
Yes,
send
yes.
out. And I sent it for a reading session with the Arditi Quartet that was going to be happening in Ottawa. And it got picked for that. And that led to a composer advisor position with Music Toronto, because the artistic producer of Music Toronto was at that string quartet festival and heard that and kind of heard my piece and heard me interacting with the quartet, said, I would like to create a position where you introduce new music from the stage. And like, great. So that was kind of this happened, and then that window opened. And then the quartet, the Arditi was interested, and it led to this Music Toronto job. And then it led to my portrait CD. And it's now been played by a lot of different quartets that I wrote for free because I didn't
for a competition.
Because I didn't have a quartet in my catalog.
Yep.
It filled a space in my catalog. So you never know what's going to happen. But I'm for years after initially writing vocal music, I was writing tons of different kinds of instrumental music. And that was fantastic because you're just having a lot of different opportunities that way. And then, when the Afghanistan Requiem came along, and then the Emily Carr songs came along with Canadian Art Song Project, just more and more I started being asked to write vocal music and kind of going back to solo song and working with singers, which I just absolutely love to do. So I'm really grateful that that's kind of come back into my world, because it's to work with poets, to work with singers, to think about theater. Like I wrote a set of a cappella soprano songs, so it's just the soprano voice.
Soprano. Yeah.
There's a poet here in Vancouver named Rachel Rose who had written a series of poems that she called Monstrous Women. It was female characters from mythology and literature, mostly mythology, who we never hear about because the story is always about the men.
Yes.
So she would often revisit these women after they've left the story, and kind of put a different context on things. And I loved that idea. And it immediately, the first poem that I read was about Daphne. And Daphne and Apollo, of course, the story is about how wonderful, like Apollo basically is chasing and assaults Daphne. And she calls out to her father, who's the river god, to help her. And her father turns her into a tree, into the laurel tree. And the story is all about Apollo worshiping the tree and creating a laurel leaves and as a crown, and just how wonderful he is. That's not, why is that the focus? Rachel's poem is basically Daphne talking to her father as the tree and saying, when I called out to you for help, this was not what I had in mind. I'm this tree. Beautiful. I'm trapped in wood forever. I've watched my friends grow old, and I'm like this. And it immediately suggested to me an unaccompanied solo voice, where at the beginning she's just standing there, and then as she sings, her hands slowly come up until she turns into the tree at the end.
The tree, yes.
It was so visual for me. And this became a set of 4 pieces like this that I worked with Heather Pawsey here from Astrolabe Music Theater. And she connected with a performative costumer who created 4 different costumes for these 4 different characters that are worn all at once. So she starts out in the first song as Buddha's wife. And I never knew this, but Buddha left his wife on the day that their son was born to go and found a religion. And she's left as a single parent.
I did not know that story.
And at the end of it, I turn it into, so it's basically a woman putting her face on and trying to manage a baby. And then at the end, you find out that she starts to look at her. It's all done in mime, and she looks at her cell phone, and you realize this is a contemporary woman who's been left on her own and is trying to manage everything because the man left her, and she's wearing the attire of Yashodhara is the character's name. And then the costumer comes and removes this layer and reveals Persephone. And then we hear that, and she removes that layer, and she becomes Daphne. And then she removes that layer, and she becomes Shamhat, the harlot priestess from the Epic of Gilgamesh, who has to play finger cymbals and dance like a pole dancer. It was like, it just, to have Rachel's idea become an idea for me, to become an idea for Heather, to become an idea for Diane, this costumer, and to create this show that is so powerful. It's just like that kind of collaboration is so amazing.
Weren't you blown away by the show?
I was. Totally, because it was so much more than I imagined it could be.
Like, even from the poetry, her name's Rosalind?
Oh, Rachel Rose.
Rachel.
Yeah.
Like, she must have been just astounded by what her poem became. She
cried the first time she saw it, which honestly, it's like, if I can make the poet cry, that's a good thing. It's a good
Oh, my goodness. Oh, man. So is that recorded too?
There's an archival video that was up for a while. I mean, it has to.
Is the music?
It has to be video. Music? Like it.
Yes.
It makes a whole lot more sense. I mean, it might be interesting to listen to as just as an a cappella singer without the visuals, but with the visuals and costumes, totally take it to a whole other place, right? But that's the intersection. That's a more obvious intersection of music and theater. I call it song theater. And the art song during the pandemic, Pacific Opera Victoria commissioned me to write a song cycle for Colin Ainsworth with piano that they were going to kind of stage and make a film because they couldn't do a live concert. And I got connected with a poet who lives in the interior named Michelle Poirier Brown. And she sent me just a raft of poetry. And we were talking about maybe writing some new stuff, but she sent me a raft of things. And I was looking at it all and I said, you know what? I'm seeing connections with this poem and this poem and this poem. And what would you think of just using some of your existing work? And she was totally cool with that. So again, it was to have a conversation about the poetry and I'm thinking about this order. And she thought, that sounds really good. And I told my husband, he's thinking of these. And it was like, oh, I know, I like that poem and I like that poem. And I'm really interested in the way that he's put those into an order, that has a shape.
Oh, man.
I wrote a song cycle for Tyler Duncan and Erica Switzer, who are from BC originally, and they wanted a piece that kind of spoke to their roots in BC. And I had it was another poet that I heard doing a reading, this time at a live concert, named Jan Zwicky, who lives on one of the islands. And she writes a lot of poetry that's inspired by the environment and a lot of poetry that's inspired by classical music because she's an amateur violinist. And that was another one where it's like, I bought a bunch of books, I got her to sign them. And we were looking for, Tyler and Erica and I were looking for poetry And I said, well, I know this poet named Jan Zwicky, and I love her music. And so they went and looked at a bunch of stuff, and I looked at a bunch of stuff. And one of the big poems that Jan wrote was inspired by Schumann's Piano Fantasy, Opus 19, 17. Anyway, Schumann's Piano Fantasy, which quotes Beethoven's Ende Geliebte. Now, Beethoven did not write well for singers, but Ende Geliebte is a song cycle that Tyler and Erica have been singing the entire time that they've known each other. And so they went,
wow.
okay, whatever you do, you have to set this poem. And it's really long. And I said, this is a really long poem. And let's see what we can do. So we picked 3 other shorter poems. So there's 3 shorter poems, and then that's piano interlude that's kind of inspired by the same musical quotations that Schumann used of Beethoven. And then it goes into this longer song that's structured in the same proportions, to talk about proportions, as the original Schumann Piano Fantasy. So there's all these layers. But the first song has a lot of jazz chords because Tyler started out as a jazz singer. And just there were just so many opportunities. I'd written for Tyler before, some bigger pieces, so I knew his voice. I'd never written for him and Erica, but to write for them together was, again, just such a gift. And to workshop it and just to hear how well it fit them. And it's like, oh man, that totally fell into place. And they don't won a big prize in the States, which was lovely, with the National Association of Teachers of Singing. I was the first Canadian to win first prize in their art song competition concert. And then Tyler and Erica recorded it as the centerpiece of an all Canadian program with a lot of BC composers. And like, just these, like, I've been so blessed to be able to work with incredible people and generous people and talented people and
it's amazing.
Collaborative people. You know, I've never been a composer that's like, here's the music, this is how it goes, do it. It's so funny. I wrote a big piece for cello and harp that was just premiered a year ago for Ariel Barnes and Heidi Crutzen as a duo called Couloir. And they both now live in Europe, but they still perform as Couloir when they have the opportunity. This is another big piece, a 40-minute piece.
Ooh.
Yeah, 40-minute piece, inspired by Sanskrit and the grammatical, if you want inspiration.
Oh, wow.
The grammatical concept of the Dvandva. And a Dvandva in Sanskrit is a word that is a combination of 2 words. So in Sanskrit, the word for parents is mother, father, for example.
Okay.
And so I picked a whole bunch of Dvandvas. They have to actually say them in Sanskrit as part of the piece. But I had a conversation with Heidi, the harpist, at a party years ago in Vancouver. And she was asking, like, what do you think? What are you thinking when you hear performers play your music? And I said, I'm just sitting there thinking, I've done my part of the work. They've put so much into this. I really want it to go well for them.
Right.
And she said, oh, that's amazing, because we're up there thinking, I really want it to go well for him. It's like we're both up there kind of rooting for each other. And I love that. One thing I don't do is I don't write electronic music, because I'm interested in, I want to work with the player. I want to work with the instrumentalist. I want to work with the singer. I want them to go out on a stage or wherever they are and connect with an audience and have everybody be a part of this. To me, my job as a composer is to put on the page as clearly and succinctly as possible what my intention is, and then turn it over to the performer and have them
Let them go.
bring themselves to it. And I
Yes.
want them, they're going to look at what I put on the page because that's what I meant, but they're going to find their way into that, right?
Oh,
And they're going to bring their own layer to it, and that's part. I mean, that works with instrumentalists, but it works particularly with singers who are really
with singers.
singing out into the audience, and
Yeah.
really connecting with the audience in a very direct way, and telling stories. Like for me, an art song it's a little opera scene. There's story, there's backstory, there's character. There's you're telling a story, and that's why
Yeah.
I like working with living poets, because they're telling stories of now.
Of real.
And yeah,
Yes.
and I
Yes.
write the music for that, and the singers and the pianists, or whatever the instrumental part is, they are now giving that to an audience and adding their own layers and telling those stories. That's
Artists
phenomenal.
artists must love collaborating with you because you have like an
I hope
incredible
so.
ability, just even our discussion here, to articulate what your ideas are. Like everything you've talked about, there's a picture that forms in my head
That's good.
of like how this is fitting together. Like especially when you talked about the tree and the formation of the tree and coming out of that with the myth. I'm kind of blown away. I gotta ask you a question, Jeff. Here,
Yeah.
so if we go way back to where we started, and you're gonna go off to Laurier to be an accountant,
Yes.
and I'm thinking of accountant and I'm kind of putting this kind of in my own picture too, because I set off to be an engineer. And it's like that established role. You kind of got things all fit together. You kind of know you're going to buy the house, you're going to have the family, you're going to buy the car, the cottage, the family, all that stuff. It's all pre kind of planned. That's what it is. Now you look at what you've kind of gone through in this conversation today in your life, and almost every single story you've told, like, came out of nowhere. Like it's not like, okay, it's 4 o'clock today, we're going to the meeting in 7A. Like none of it's like that. From the time you hear CBC on your morning radio and you hear Yosef from Montreal's poem, to like you go to the reading and you hear Rachel's poetry. Like none of that like you could pre-program. Like how did like that accountant world that that's kind of set up to move to this world that like other than outside of like having faith that something's going to come your way, or do you even think about that
The
in your
faith,
life,
the
like,
faith is a lot of it. You have to believe
because
that it's possible. And you have to
where
be,
did that come from for you, or do you
you know
know
what?
even?
I mean, there are lots of points in my life and in my career where I would say the universe has presented something that is to say, are you sure this is the direction you want to go? And an example of that is when I worked between degrees, so largely in libraries. Well, between undergrad and masters, I worked at the University of Waterloo Library. I've worked in libraries much of my life. I love libraries. And
Ah,
then between masters and doctorate, I worked as a box office manager in Toronto, so arts admin. Um, I was looking for a doctoral program, and I was looking in Canada. And the reality was at that time, and I think this is kind of still true, you went to Toronto, you went to Montreal, or you went to Vancouver. I had just done a master's
okay,
at Toronto, and I wasn't going to, I think it's a bad idea to keep going to the same
yes,
school.
right,
Um,
right.
McGill was a PhD program, which was very academically oriented, and I wanted to get more practical experience. And UBC offered a DMA, the Doctor of Musical Arts. And I applied and I got accepted. And I didn't have enough money, and you could defer for a year. So I asked for a year's deferral. And I was going to keep working at the box office. And then I got laid off briefly. And I went to visit. I mentioned my violinist friend. She was a student at Cleveland. And she said, well, come down here. You should come visit. So I went and visited. And
No.
I
Right.
got down, I got to CIM. I walked in the front door, and a voice in the back of my head said, this is where you're going to go. And it was not the plan. It was completely out of the blue.
Man.
And it seriously,
wow.
It was like I walked into the lobby and just stopped. And this voice said, oh, this is where you're going to go to school. And then I met, and it turned out somebody that I had been at Laurier with was doing his doctorate there. So I talked to him, and my friend said, oh, you should meet Nick. He's one of the doctoral students. He's a friend of mine. He can tell you about the program. And I met someone who was a cellist who worked in the admissions office. So I met all these people, and it was like, okay, the plan is clear. I'm going to go to school here. So I spent the next year preparing for my audition, studied with Alexina Louis in Toronto for a year to write an orchestra piece that I could send in for my audition, preparing for my entrance exams. You had to write a 3-hour history exam and a 3-hour theory exam and all of this, and had an interview with Dr. Erb, and it all went super well. And I went back to Toronto, and I was living on the second floor of a house with a clarinetist friend. And I got the thin letter of rejection.
Oh.
And I'm like crying. It's like, I couldn't have done any better.
Oh,
and my friend Monica said, well, call them and ask for feedback. And I called, and my friend who was working in the admissions office answered the phone and said, I'll put you into the admissions officer. And we had a chat, and I asked about, is there a possibility of coming in January, and he was like, there was just no space. We would encourage you to reapply. Sometimes a space opens up mid-year, whatever. And then I talked to my friend, and he said, so this is what happened. They only had 2 doctoral spots opened, and there were 3 people that Dr. Erb wanted. And they put 3 names in a hat, and they pulled out 2 of them, and yours was still in the hat.
Oh my.
And they phoned those 2 people. This is like February of that year for the following year.
Oh, man.
They phoned those people and said, we're offering you a spot, but you have to tell us today whether you want it.
Wow.
So, of course, they're still waiting to hear from other applications. They both said yes. And so I was told no. And a couple of months later, those 2 people got better offers elsewhere. And they said, oh, by the way, I'm not coming. So now imagine this. I got this from my friend.
It's hard to imagine this is true story.
This is
totally unbelievable. This is crazy,
Dr. Erb
Jeff.
shows up in the admissions office and walks into the director's office and closes the door. There's a space, of course, at the top and the bottom of the door. My friend is sitting outside, and he hears them. And Dr. Erb says, so now we have no doctoral students coming. And the admissions director says, well, what about Jeff Ryan? You really liked him. And Dr. Erb said, he was very talented. He's probably made other plans by now.
Oh,
and my friend leapt out of his seat and knocked on the door and said, I know Jeff, and if you call him today, he will say yes.
Yes.
And I was at work, and
Oh man.
so this guy's name was Bill Fay, the director's name. He called the main number, which was the stage door. So I'm in the box office, and one of the box office operators says, my housemate's name was Monica. Somebody says, Monica's on line 7. And I said, can you ask her to hold? There's another call, because stage door says, Jeff, there's a call for you on line 1. So I answer line 1, and it's Bill Fay. And it turned out that Bill Fay had called my house, got Monica. My brother was visiting. And he said, this is Bill Fay from the Cleveland Institute of Music. And she turned to my brother and went, it's Bill Fay. And my brother's like, who is that? Oh, Jeff's not here, but he's at work. I can give you that number. And so he calls, and she immediately calls me. And so he offers me a spot, and I say yes. And then I know why Monica's on the phone, right? Now, wait for it. Then I send a letter to UBC to say, thank you for holding the spot. I'm not coming. And before they get the letter, I get a call, also at work, from UBC. And they say, we're just calling to make sure that you're still wanting the spot. And I said, oh, well, you haven't got my letter yet. I've just sent you a letter to say I'm not coming. And they said, oh, that's good to know. But here's the thing. You've been nominated for a scholarship. Does that affect your decision?
Oh.
And I went, no, it does not affect my decision.
Oh, man.
And they said, that's great, because it's not a guarantee that you would have gotten it. And it means that someone else is going to get it. And I said, that's great. And going to Cleveland changed my life. I mean, I got to write for the Cleveland Orchestra. I made incredible friends. Dr. Erb made me into the composer that I am, just got me thinking about how music works and how to make music.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, that was a magical time that set me on the path that I am now. And I mean, in terms of the accounting, I have my accounting software. As a freelancer, I have to keep track of where my money goes, because income is a wave.
Yes.
And I've already done my taxes. I rough out my taxes in December, so that I kind of know, oh, should I put some money in an RSP, or, what do I need?
Right.
Yeah. Or like, how much am I getting back? Because I need every dollar now, because it's so much more difficult than it was. But so the accounting thing still, but I mentioned earlier about the elegance of accounting, how the numbers have to work.
Yes.
And
beauty.
Elegance in music is also something that I strive for. That's part of Mozart's music, for example. There is an elegance.
Yes, elegance.
There's an elegance to that music, and elegance is something that I try to make sure is a part of every piece that I write.
I can imagine, and I certainly have enjoyed at least of one of those pieces, and after this, I'm going to be going and enjoying a few more. Jeff, we're not going to top that story. Like I think that one is. And I was going to say, probably need to kind of land this thing. It's been an unbelievable conversation today. I thank you so much for your time. Before we wrap, there's a couple things. Okay. Before we kind of wrap up, you've got stuff coming up.
Yeah.
You mentioned already Laurier in the middle of March, but you've got other things on your calendar. So this is probably going to come out in about 3 weeks. So if you want anything that you want to promote that you've got going on, by all means, and where people can find you.
Okay. Um, it's bizarre that between January and June of this year, I have, I think, 5 world premieres. It's weird. It's weird.
Oh, wow.
But I don't know if this is going to be out by February 27th, but the Orchid Ensemble, which is erhu, jung, and marimba, again, taking risks, writing for instruments I've never
Yes.
written for before. They're premiering a piece, a trio that I wrote for them at Capilano University on the 27th of February. And then they'll be playing it again in Vancouver at the Sonic Boom Festival, either March 20th or the 21st at the Fire Hall. So if any of your listeners are in Vancouver or North Vancouver, those are things to look out for. If you're anywhere near Waterloo, March 15th, Laurier, a big piece, we were talking about big pieces, is an opera oratorio that's been in development for like 17 years with a librettist that I love to work with, Michael Lewis McLennan. We've written a short opera together, which is another thing that's happening. But this is a big opera, like 75 minutes. Oratorio will be presented in concert. It's by the Vancouver Bach Choir and an instrumental ensemble with, again, Christina Szabo, who could not love writing for Christina Szabo. A couple of other soloists. It's basically an immigration story based on the Book of Ruth, which is a made up story about how to properly treat and accept and welcome people who are not like yourself.
Yes.
And that could not be more topical now. And in reality, over the 17 years that we've been developing this, it has always been front page news. So I'm really grateful to the Bach Choir and Les Dalla, who conducts the choir, for taking this on. That's going to be premiered in May at the Vancouver Playhouse. Super excited about that. And then in April or May, one of the big projects last year was a little opera called The Laurels, which is also, coincidentally, a contemporary take on the Daphne and Apollo myth, but there's a real twist at the end that Michael McLennan and I wrote together in the in 2000. It was premiered in 2002. And it's had a few productions, concerts and productions since. It had a production at the Glenn Gould School in Toronto a couple of years ago, and the director for that, it's a 14-minute piece. The director for that said, I see this as a film. And I said, I've always seen it as a film.
That's a film.
Because it's running, the premise of it that Michael and I started with was a woman is cutting through a park at night and realizes she's being followed. That's the premise. I won't give away more, but that is going to be made in a film, into a short film. And that it was an excuse to do a studio recording of it. And so we did that in September here in Vancouver with a fantastic cast with Jacqueline Woodley and Nathan Cohen as the soprano and baritone, and an ensemble of 9 players. Rosemary Thompson conducted, who I've known also all my entire career, fantastic conductor. That's going to be released as an EP in April or May. So that'll be on all of the usual streaming services. And it's interesting, it connects us to something you were saying earlier about, how people listen now. It's not going to be part of a 60 or 65 minute full length album. It's going to be a 14-minute piece as an EP that people can buy and download, listen to just as
Cool.
itself. It's going to be itself because that's how people listen now, right?
Yep.
They're like, I
Very
like the
true.
sound of that
Very
piece.
true.
I'm downloading that one. So
That's kind of how it works.
so there's a lot coming up. It's again riding the wave. It's kind of a wave. It's the top of the wave right now. We'll see what happens after that.
Very exciting. So do you have a website or
I do, and you know what? It's the simplest thing in the world. It's jeffreyryan.com.
Perfect.
So
Perfect.
simple. It turns out there's a percussionist named Jeffrey Ryan at Northwestern who's also composing, but I beat him to that website, so now he has to go by J Ryan. And there's a composer in Australia who wrote the music for RoboCop, whose name is Jeffrey Ryan. And I have a couple of things that have been used in films, and our IMDb entries get mixed up.
Interesting.
Yeah. I need a more unique name somehow.
Well, I was going to say I usually say, and I'll offer that up to you too, to kind of wrap up things. Is that in what we've had this wonderful discussion on? Is there anything you'd like to leave people with, whether it be audience listeners or students? Anything that comes to, like, you put the post-it up of risk, which I just love that, and you've talked a lot about some of your mentors like Owen, and kind of teaching to step out of the box. But do you have anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to kind of just add or wrap up with?
I think we've kind of touched on it already, but really it's, if I had to say anything to an audience, it is risk. It's take a chance. You know, when I go to a concert that's all new music, if there's one piece that I love, and a really good benchmark is, damn, I wish I had written that. Like that, if there's one of those pieces, that's a fantastic concert. That's a good evening, right? If there's one piece that I really love, but there's going to be a whole bunch of things that I haven't heard before, and some of them I'm going to like, and some of them I may not like, and that's okay, right? Yep. You take the chance. And I want to encourage every potential audience member out there that if you see a name that you don't recognize, or something like, oh, I don't know what that is, check it out. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You know, take the risk and try it, and go in with I don't know what this is going to be, but let's find out. Have that curiosity.
No, I think that's like perfect, Jeff, because it's like it fits in exactly with what you said about the faith, and just having that set forth, because without the two, they really work hand in hand. And to me, we've got a society kind of today that's just telling us not to do that. And I think we miss a lot of stuff without people just stepping out. We're all scared, but like, to let that stop you from what you just said, taking a little bit of risk. It doesn't have to be a big risk. Just risk it.
Right.
Wonderful. Great. I was going to say, Jeff, this has been a terrific conversation. Appreciated your time. We'll give you back some of your day. I thank you for today listening to Better Than Not. I hope you've enjoyed this, I'll say, simply amazing and so informative conversation with Jeffrey Ryan, music composer, and what a story. Just kind of wonderful to be that. I hope you'll subscribe to Better Than Not and hear more stories like this. And for now, we'll say goodbye. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Doug. Take care.
Are we on? Good. Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not.